Working on a classic television set wasn't a dream job for the crews of these 15 actresses. It was a daily fight for survival. We are pulling the curtain back on the beloved TV icons who were absolute tyrants behind the scenes. We're talking about flying props, screaming matches, and leading ladies who refused to even speak to their co-stars between takes. One iconic best friend duo hated each other so much they turned their sitcom into a territorial war. Get ready to see the ruthless reality behind the most famous faces in television history. Number 1. Lucille Ball. If you walked onto the Desilu studio lot in the late 1950s, you wouldn't find a scatterbrained redhead getting her hand stuck in a candy conveyor belt. You would find a corporate executive who intimidated industry veterans. Lucille Ball essentially built the modern television production model, but behind the cameras, she governed her sets with absolute unforgiving authority. To the millions watching CBS every week, she was America's favorite zany housewife. To the writers, directors, and guest stars who worked for her, she was a micromanager who rarely smiled. Factually, she was the first woman to run a major Hollywood studio. But the way she operated was closer to a military campaign. She dictated everything from the precise comedic timing of her co-stars to the exact placement of background props. If an actor missed their mark or stumbled on a line during rehearsals, she didn't offer encouragement. She openly scrutinized their competence in front of the crew. People who worked alongside her frequently noted that her default state wasn't humorous. It was cold and deeply analytical. She leveraged her massive ratings to force the network into business deals that heavily favored her production company. While Desi Arnaz often handled the charm in the boardroom, Lucille controlled the creative floor through sheer dominance. She didn't just want a successful sitcom, she demanded total ownership of the production apparatus. It is widely acknowledged by television historians that without her abrasive, uncompromising grip on daily operations, the empire of Desilu would not have survived. She wasn't just playing a character fighting for control on screen. Off-screen, she owned the entire operation, and she made sure everyone on the payroll never forgot it. Number 2. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford didn't view herself as an actress. She viewed herself as a blue-chip corporation. On screen, she spent decades perfecting the role of the resilient, self-sacrificing matriarch. But off-camera, her public image was an ironclad asset maintained through relentless intimidation and a refusal to yield the spotlight to anyone, including her own family. While she is primarily remembered as a cinematic powerhouse, her late career foray into television exposed the clinical ruthlessness of her work ethic. The clearest demonstration of this wasn't a standard backstage tantrum, it was a calculated professional takeover. In 1968, her adopted daughter Christina took a temporary medical leave from the daytime soap opera, The Secret Storm. Rather than stepping back to offer support, Joan contacted the producers and assumed the 28-year-old's character herself. She was over 60 at the time. Factually, network executives eagerly approved the casting for the massive publicity it generated. However, to the crew and cast members present, the move was widely interpreted as a deliberate, vindictive flex of industry muscle. Crawford arrived on the fast-paced daytime set demanding the reverence of a 1940s studio monarch. She required specialized lighting, rigid adherence to her terms, and complete deference from actors decades her junior. She wasn't there just to help a production stay on schedule. The general consensus among those who witnessed her television appearances was that she was there to remind the industry and her daughter that the Crawford brand held absolute authority. Every move was a transaction designed to keep herself at the top of the call sheet, no matter the personal cost. Number 3. Loretta Young. If you uttered a profanity on the set of The Loretta Young Show, you were immediately fined. It wasn't a running joke, it was a mandated financial penalty enforced by the star herself. Known to the millions of viewers who watched her sweep through a set of double doors in a glamorous gown every week, Loretta Young was the epitome of grace, piety, and moral clarity. But among Hollywood crews and network executives, she was referred to as the Iron Butterfly. The nickname wasn't a compliment. It was a direct reference to a woman who cloaked a highly aggressive, dictatorial management style in chiffon and pearls. Factually, as the host and frequent star of her own 1950s anthology series, Young held a level of creative control that was incredibly rare at the time. She didn't just perform, she dictated the production schedule, the camera angles, and the behavioral standards of everyone on the payroll. While she framed the infamous swear box as a way to maintain a wholesome working environment, many crew members interpreted it as a mechanism of absolute dominance. She was micromanaging not just the technical aspects of television production, but the personal conduct of the adults working around her. This rigid enforcement of morality was ultimately a protective measure for her corporate brand. Young had a history of going to extreme lengths to protect her marketability, most notably hiding a pregnancy by Clark Gable, and later staging an adoption of her own biological daughter to avoid a career-ending scandal. That same instinct for brutal self-preservation defined her television career. She demanded total obedience from her staff, leveraging her serene, untouchable public image to rule her studio lot with an iron fist. Number 4. Bette Davis. Bette Davis didn't just walk onto a television set, she occupied it like a hostile military force. By the time she transitioned into made-for-TV movies in the 1970s and 80s, her reputation as a cinematic titan preceded her, and she wielded that legacy like a weapon against anyone she deemed incompetent. Viewers watching her Emmy-winning performance in Strangers, the story of a mother and daughter, saw a masterclass in tension. What the crew saw was a daily exercise in professional subjugation. Davis approached television production with the same combative adversarial mindset she had famously used to battle studio bosses decades earlier. Only this time, her targets were often television directors and younger co-stars who found themselves completely outmatched by her aggressive stamina. Factually, Davis was known to halt productions to dissect scripts line by line, demanding structural changes on the spot. If a director gave her an instruction she disagreed with, she wouldn't politely decline. She would publicly dress them down in front of the entire crew, actively stripping away their authority to establish her own. Those who worked alongside her frequently described the environment as a trial by fire. You didn't collaborate with Bette Davis, you survived her. She wasn't throwing tantrums out of mere vanity. Her behavior was a calculated assertion of power. She understood that in the fast-paced, budget-conscious landscape of network television, the only way to protect her standard of quality was to be the most terrifying person in the room. For Davis, fear was a highly effective management tool. She didn't care if the production team liked her as long as they understood that her creative terms were entirely non-negotiable. Number 5. Bea Arthur. When the director called cut on the set of The Golden Girls, the warmth around the kitchen table instantly vanished. Bea Arthur didn't just play the authoritative, uncompromising Dorothy Zbornak, she governed the production environment with the exact same imposing rigidity. To the audience, she was the sarcastic but fiercely loyal anchor of the group. Behind the scenes, she was a classically trained theater veteran who approached television comedy with a strict, almost elitist professionalism. Factually, her well-documented friction with co-star Betty White wasn't a standard Hollywood rivalry. It was a daily exercise in workplace isolation. Arthur openly despised White's cheerful, people-pleasing demeanor and her habit of breaking character to engage with the live studio audience. In response, Arthur frequently refused to speak to White between takes, creating a freezing atmosphere that the rest of the cast and crew simply had to endure. She understood exactly how much leverage she held over the network. The show's massive financial success relied entirely on the specific dynamic of its 4 leads, and Arthur knew the operation would collapse without her. Producers and writers often operated in a state of high anxiety around her, keenly aware that her dissatisfaction could derail a week's shooting schedule. Ultimately, her control over the environment culminated in the show's sudden end. Despite the series pulling in massive ratings and generating millions in syndication revenue, Arthur decided she was finished after 7 seasons. She didn't negotiate for more money and she didn't compromise with the network. She simply walked away, effectively forcing one of the most profitable sitcoms of the 1980s to shut down because she no longer wanted to clock in. She didn't just star in the enterprise, she held the power to dismantle it. Number 6. Cindy Williams. Audiences tuning in to Laverne and Shirley saw the ultimate portrait of wide-eyed optimism. But behind the scenes, Paramount Pictures saw a relentless negotiator who routinely brought a multi-million-dollar production to a grinding halt. As the co-lead of the most-watched sitcom in America, Cindy Williams understood that her wholesome image was a highly lucrative corporate asset. However, she was constantly battling a severe power imbalance. The show was created and run by her co-star's brother, Gary Marshall. To protect her screen time and financial standing, Williams adopted a fiercely defensive, often combative approach to her daily work. Factually, she and Penny Marshall engaged in explosive disputes over script lines, camera focus, and billing. The working environment became so volatile that writers carefully tallied jokes to ensure strict equality, knowing that a perceived slight would stall production for hours. Every scene wasn't just a comedy routine, it was a territorial dispute. The boiling point wasn't a standard backstage tantrum but a brutal legal standoff. When Williams became pregnant in 1982, negotiations with the studio turned toxic. According to Williams, executives attempted to force her into a physically impossible shooting schedule, expecting her to work on her actual due date. Instead of backing down or compromising, she weaponized her contract. She walked off the set and filed a $20 million lawsuit against the studio and the production company. While the dispute was eventually settled out of court, Williams essentially forced the network to write her off the show entirely. She proved that beneath the soft sweaters and sweet smile was a shrewd operator who wouldn't hesitate to dismantle her own television legacy rather than surrender her leverage to network executives. Number 7. Penny Marshall. On the Paramount lot, Penny Marshall had an advantage no agent could negotiate. The creator and executive producer of the show was her brother, Gary Marshall. But rather than bringing stability to the set of Laverne and Shirley, this familial leverage turned the production floor into a highly pressurized combat zone. Viewers knew Laverne DeFazio as a tough, wisecracking brewery worker who always had her best friend's back. Reality presented a sharp contrast. Factually, Marshall and her co-star Cindy Williams engaged in such intense, protracted screaming matches that guest stars and crew members frequently described the atmosphere as terrifying. Marshall didn't just argue over dialogue. She was known to physically hurl objects across the room when a script or a shooting schedule didn't meet her exact specifications. This behavior wasn't just artistic temperament. It was a crude but effective form of power hoarding. Because she was the boss's sister, she operated with a layer of invulnerability. She used explosive frustration to override directors and intimidate the writing staff, heavily demanding that the narrative focus on her character's physical comedy. The writers essentially functioned as workplace mediators, carefully counting jokes and screen time to prevent sudden walkouts. While the studio executives tolerated the chaos because the network ratings were astronomical, the daily operational cost was immense. Marshall was managing her career through sheer intimidation. She understood that in the high-stakes economy of 1970s television, whoever created the most friction usually secured the best camera angle. The screaming, the flying props, and the constant threats of delaying production were all leverage tactics. She secured her position as a sitcom icon, but she ensured the crew paid for every laugh. Number 8. Valerie Harper. In 1986, the star of the hit NBC family sitcom Valerie decided to test exactly how indispensable she was to a multi-million-dollar production. The answer she received completely dismantled her television career. To the viewing public, Valerie Harper was the ultimate relatable down-to-earth woman. She built her entire brand on playing Rhoda Morgenstern, the self-deprecating best friend on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. But by the time she secured her own 1980s sitcom, she had learned the brutal economics of Hollywood syndication. Factually, after the first 2 seasons of Valerie proved successful, Harper and her husband, who also acted as her manager, did not just negotiate for a standard raise. They engaged in a high-stakes corporate blockade. She demanded a massive per-episode salary increase and a significantly larger percentage of the lucrative back-end profits. When Lorimar television executives resisted, Harper weaponized her screen presence. She walked off the set and halted production. She operated on the assumption that she was the irreplaceable anchor of the franchise, using a leverage tactic successfully deployed by other sitcom titans. But instead of capitulating to keep the profitable machine running, the studio retaliated. They called her bluff, fired her suitor for breach of contract, and kept the show on the air by simply killing off her character and renaming the series. While Harper eventually won a wrongful termination lawsuit years later, the immediate professional damage was absolute. Her standoff highlighted the cold reality of network economics. A star can leverage their on-screen warmth to secure off-screen wealth, but the moment their financial demands outweigh the value of the brand, the studio will seamlessly replace them. Number 9. Suzanne Somers. In the fall of 1980, the production of Three's Company didn't stall because of a creative dispute. It stopped entirely because of a highly calculated corporate strike initiated by the woman playing the show's most naive character. Suzanne Somers understood the exact market value of Chrissy Snow. While millions of viewers tuned in to watch her play a bubbly, easily confused roommate, Somers herself was executing an aggressive financial strategy. Factually, as the 5th season approached, she demanded her per-episode salary be raised from $30,000 to $150,000 to explicitly match the compensation of her male co-star, John Ritter. She also demanded a 10% cut of the show's highly lucrative back-end profits. When the ABC network executives refused, she didn't just express dissatisfaction. She essentially took the shooting schedule hostage. She frequently refused to show up for work, forcing writers into frantic, last-minute script rewrites. When she did appear, she completely isolated herself, refusing to rehearse or even speak with Ritter and Joyce DeWitt. The studio environment turned openly hostile, with the cast and crew deeply resenting the gridlock she created to secure her contract. She was attempting a massive power play, leveraging the reality that her image was a primary driver of the show's syndication value. But rather than surrendering control to her demands, the studio made an equally hardline business decision. They reduced her screen time to a mere 60 seconds per episode, filmed completely separate from the rest of the cast before terminating her contract entirely. Somers gambled her position on the belief that her public popularity gave her absolute leverage, only to learn that the network was perfectly willing to break up the hit trio to protect its own financial authority. Number 10. Jane Wyman. On the set of Falcon Crest. You didn't just walk up and start a conversation with Jane Wyman. You waited until you were addressed, or you didn't speak at all. As Angela Channing, she played the ruthless matriarch of a California wine empire. But factually, her management of the CBS production lot required no acting. Wyman operated as the undisputed autocratic CEO of the series. She didn't just top the call sheet, she established a strict, unyielding social hierarchy among the cast and crew. She instituted rigidly enforced boundaries regarding interaction on the set. When the network brought in a high-profile guest star like Lana Turner to boost ratings, Wyman didn't welcome the collaboration. She viewed it as a direct corporate threat to her territory. The two Hollywood veterans engaged in a freezing, cold war. Wyman refused to speak to Turner between takes and leveraged her close relationship with the producers to ensure Turner's run on the show was kept as brief as possible. Wyman understood exactly how much money her face generated for the network. She used that financial reality to dictate casting decisions, script approvals, and the daily shooting schedule. If a storyline didn't serve her character's dominance or align with her personal values, the writers simply had to change it. Unlike younger stars who used explosive tantrums to get their way, Wyman's method of control was entirely clinical. She governed her television set through a calculated, icy detachment. She didn't have to raise her voice to remind the crew who was in charge. She simply let the studio know that the entire multi-million-dollar operation existed solely at her discretion. Number 11. Lana Turner. When Lana Turner arrived on the set of Falcon Crest in 1982, she wasn't just a guest star clocking in for a paycheck. She was a fading cinematic empire attempting to colonize a television studio. Viewers tuned in to see a glamorous rival challenge Jane Wyman's character. But, factually, Turner was completely incompatible with the strict budget-conscious economy of 1980s television. She brought the demanding, highly expensive habits of the 1940s studio system straight onto a fast-paced production floor. She didn't simply ask to look good on camera, she required a specialized, time-consuming lighting setup that brought the daily shooting schedule to a grinding halt. She demanded an extensive custom wardrobe and expected the crew to cater to the slow, deliberate pacing she was accustomed to during her peak years at MGM. This wasn't merely artistic vanity, it was a desperate attempt to assert her perceived status. At the time, transitioning to television was often viewed as a demotion for a silver screen legend, so she used operational friction to prove she was still royalty. She frequently refused to memorize her dialogue, relying instead on strategically placed cue cards, which forced the director to completely alter their camera angles just to accommodate her limitations. Her behavior immediately triggered a bitter turf war with Jane Wyman, the undisputed executive power on the set. The two women refused to speak to each other unless the cameras were rolling. Turner gambled on the assumption that her historical legacy gave her the leverage to dictate the production's workflow. But the network was running a business, not a museum. When the financial and temporal cost of her demands began to outweigh the initial ratings bump she provided, her character was abruptly written out. Number 12. Dorothy Malone. An Academy Award usually guarantees absolute deference on a studio lot. But on a primetime television soap opera in the 1960s, it simply made you an expensive problem. Dorothy Malone entered the production of Peyton Place as an Oscar-winning commodity. To the viewing public, she was Constance Mackenzie, the warm, complex mother figure anchoring a scandalous New England town. To the executives at 20th Century Fox, she was a highly paid employee who fundamentally refused to let the studio devalue her brand. As the show became a massive commercial hit, the network made a calculated financial pivot. They began shifting the narrative focus and the screen time away from their expensive veteran and heavily toward cheaper, younger breakout stars like Mia Farrow. Malone didn't accept this professional demotion quietly. Factually, she openly challenged the showrunners, sharply criticizing the script quality and making her disdain for the producers widely known across the set. She approached her role with the rigid entitlement of the old Hollywood system, demanding the production hierarchy remain intact. When the producers responded to the daily friction by abruptly firing her and literally recasting her character with another actress to keep the syndication machine running, Malone retaliated not with a tabloid interview but with litigation. She filed a $1.6 million lawsuit against the studio for breach of contract and slander. While the dispute was eventually settled out of court, her actions clarified exactly how she viewed her profession. Malone understood that in the television industry, visibility is currency. She wasn't just defending her artistic pride, she was executing a calculated legal strike against a corporation that tried to strip away her market value. Number 13. Zsa Zsa Gabor. When Zsa Zsa Gabor arrived for a television guest appearance, the production budget immediately had to account for her lifestyle. She didn't simply learn her lines and step onto the set. She imported an entire aristocratic ecosystem that the network was forced to fund. Throughout the 1960s and into the 1980s, Gabor was a frequent guest star on major programs ranging from Batman to The Love Boat. To the audience, she provided a glamorous, humorous glimpse into the lives of the ultra-rich. But behind the scenes, she operated with a staggering level of elitist entitlement. Factually, she treated television crews not as professional colleagues but as personal domestic staff. She routinely ignored standard call times, demanded specialized lighting to protect her visual brand, and expected absolute deference from everyone on the payroll. Her behavior wasn't just the result of a difficult personality, it was her core business model. Gabor was one of the first modern celebrities to successfully monetize the concept of being high maintenance. She understood that networks were paying for the spectacle of her extravagance. By refusing to comply with standard production workflow, she reinforced her market value as an untouchable diva. The public caught a clear glimpse of this mindset in 1989 when she famously slapped a Beverly Hills police officer over a traffic stop. But to the producers and production assistants who had worked with her for decades, that incident was simply a very public display of her daily operational strategy. She fundamentally believed that basic rules and professional courtesy were meant for the working class. Gabor managed her career by ensuring that whenever she walked onto a soundstage, the entire corporate machinery stopped to cater to her specific demands. Number 14. Farrah Fawcett. At the height of the 1970s, the most famous woman on American television decided that starring in a massive network hit was actually a terrible financial deal. To the massive audience tuning into Charlie's Angels, Farrah Fawcett was the ultimate sunny, athletic Californian ideal. But off-camera, Fawcett and her management were closely examining the studio's profit margins. Factually, the network was paying her a standard restrictive rate, roughly $5,000 an episode, while simultaneously generating millions from her syndicated likeness. This was most obvious with her iconic red swimsuit poster, which sold in the tens of millions, yielding massive corporate revenue while her cut remained comparatively minimal. Instead of negotiating a standard raise for the second season, Fawcett executed a brutal corporate walkout. She simply refused to return to the set. She understood that her physical image was the exact commodity driving the entire franchise, and she refused to let the network exploit it at a discount. The studio retaliated immediately. Aaron Spelling and the production company filed a massive breach of contract lawsuit intending to legally freeze her out of the industry as a warning to other actors. But Fawcett didn't back down. The legal standoff ultimately forced a compromise where she only had to make 6 guest appearances over the next 2 years, effectively buying her freedom. While her behavior on future sets was frequently criticized by directors as erratic and highly defensive, her exit from Charlie's Angels wasn't a simple backstage tantrum. It was a calculated business strike. Fawcett realized she was the product, and she was willing to paralyze the biggest show in the country to reclaim ownership of her own brand. Number 15. Agnes Moorehead. When the cameras stopped rolling on the set of Bewitched, the magic immediately vanished, replaced by a rigid old-school theatrical hierarchy dictated entirely by Agnes Moorehead. To the audience, she was Endora, the sharply dressed, sarcastic mother-in-law who loved to torment her mortal son-in-law. But factually, her on-screen hostility wasn't much of a stretch. Moorehead was a classically trained Academy Award-nominated actress who viewed the television sitcom format as a financial necessity rather than an artistic endeavor. She didn't just show up to read her lines, she used her prestigious background to establish an environment of strict, uncompromising elitism. Her approach to workplace dominance became glaringly obvious in 1969, when the network made a major corporate pivot. When Dick York, the original co-star, was forced to leave the show due to severe health issues, ABC executives replaced him with Dick Sargent to keep their lucrative property alive. Moorehead did not accept this executive maneuver. She didn't just privately complain about the recasting, she launched a daily campaign of professional isolation. Moorehead openly despised Sargent, freezing him out during rehearsals and creating a deeply uncomfortable atmosphere by refusing to acknowledge his presence between takes. She weaponized her seniority, forcing her new co-worker to navigate a profoundly hostile workplace just to hit his marks. The studio executives and producers simply looked the other way. They understood that Moorehead's character was a vital asset to the show's ratings. She leveraged that exact corporate dependency to act with complete impunity, ensuring the network paid her handsomely while she actively punished the man they hired to stabilize the franchise.